Greetings, fellow scribes! Welcome back to the archive. This week, I conclude my series on the realms of Pugmire by talking about the mechanics in Pirates of Pugmire. There's rules here for different callings that are unique to the environs of the Acid Sea, and of course, there's rules for the races of the birds and lizards, as well as the ships that ply the Acid Sea. So sit back, relax, and enjoy as we talk about what makes ye pirates. One of the distinctive things with the Pirates of Pugmire portion of the setting is firearms. And there's a reason why firearms aren't big in the other parts of the realms of Pugmire. And that is something called Gunpowder Panic. You see, dogs, cats, etc., they are still uplifted animals. They are not humans. So they have instinctive reactions to things. In this case, it is the scared reaction and death if they fail a charisma saving throw whenever firearms are fired around them. Now, certain callings, namely the gun dog and the torpedo, are immune to Gunpowder Panic, just because it's part of what makes their calling what it is. Both use guns extensively, and their allies, i.e. the rest of the party with them, it's assumed that they've gotten some degree of resistance to Gunpowder Panic simply because they're around people who use gunpowder a lot. So they get advantage on this saving throw. If someone did not expect a gun to be used, like, say you're somewhere outside of the ocean, like, inside the cities, they get disadvantage because guns are loud and they scare cats and dogs. Now, speaking of gun dogs and torpedoes, let's talk about the callings that are unique to the Pirates of Pugmire area. Now, understand, birds and lizards can take any of these callings, but two of these callings only dogs can take, two of these only cats can take. Or should I say, two of these cats can't take, and two of these dogs can't take. Crusaders are, well, they don't quite totally fit into any classic archetype. Best analogy to the Crusader is they are a sort of a fighter archetype, but at the same time they have some clerical spell casting, so they're kind of a paladin archetype. It is really the closest you can get. The next up is the gun dog. And they're sort of like a ranged combat type, except they are only D8 per level, hit die. And Constitution and Dexterity are their primary attributes. The big thing about gun dogs is they like to be loud when they are shooting. They basically arrive in a cloud of smoke and fire when they come into combat. They always have a melee weapon and a firearm, because that's what they do. They are gun dogs. Birds and lizards who take their role call them gunners. Torpedoes are one of the ones dogs cannot take. And they are another gun-using class. They are also a D8 hit die. And they are dexterity and strength. They are... Best way to think of them is where a gun dog is loud and boisterous, the torpedo is the quiet gun shoved into the pillow. They're stealthy gun users, if such a thing can exist. Or, to put it another way, they are assassins. They are precise, and they are targeted when they go after something. The next of the ones that dogs cannot take are mystics. These are a more wizardly class, though they are still D8 hit die per level. And that's pretty much their thing. They're not they're not quite like other spellcasters. What sets Mystic apart from the other spellcaster classes is, the arcane casters of like the dogs and the cats, is they're wanderers and they're attracted to the sea. They don't have a necessary single focus, as they have a bunch of items that they use to do their magic that are related to the sea itself. And then you come into the two callings that anything can take. Alchemists. They're potion makers. They're essentially alchemists. Right down to making bombs and potions. And interestingly, they can take either artisan or mancer, i.e. either the dog or the cat version of spellcasting. But they also make potions. And of course, they are intelligence and wisdom. And they're a D8 per level hit die. Finally, you have rhymers. Rhymers are essentially tale tellers. They are a D8 per level hit die, and essentially, if I were to compare them to something, it would be to bards. But the big thing with them is they they tell tales, they tell stories, and act the faces of a party. And when you get down to it, that's sort of what makes them what they are. They have their abilities, and they tend to focus around, well, keeping people happy, distracting people, etc., etc. Now, when you talk about the races, the new races of the lizards and the birds, there's actually very little difference between the different types of lizards, really. Sort of. You have geckos, who are, well, geckos. They have a +1 dexterity and charisma, and the knack chameleon, which is exactly what it sounds like. Serpents, who are upper bodies like hands and arms, lower bodies snake. They are a +1 strength, +1 intelligence, and they have the ability slither, which basically means that they can go a little faster on the ground. Turtles have a +1 constitution, +1 wisdom, and the ability hunker down. They can boost their defenses because of their shell. Birds are parrots, which are +1 strength, +1 charisma, and have the ability spin. They can basically turn around really quick. And remember, parrots are not necessarily parrots. You could have an eagle that's a parrot. Parrot is simply defined as it can neither glide nor can it fly. Crows are the middle range of the birds. They have a +1 constitution, +1 intelligence, and they can glide. Which, they can't fly, but they can glide short distances. Really useful on board a ship because it means if they are up in the rigging and they fall off, well, they can glide down safely. Sparrows have a +1 dexterity, +1 wisdom, and can soar, which means they can truly fly. Every ship has a base stat line. These stats are artillery, hull, seaworthiness, and speed. Artillery ships start with 0, as in most ships' base have no weapons. Hull starts at 14. Hull is basically your ship's armor class, and as at 14 is your starting armor class for a ship. Seaworthiness is, well, basically how well your ship's staying afloat. And understand, seaworthiness is a combination of factors. It is the integrity of the hull. It's also your supplies. So a ship that has no food or water is gonna start to sink, apparently. Ships start with a base seaworthiness of 100. And speed is how far your ship can travel in a single turn. It's measured in the same scale as character movement. So ships are much faster than characters. And ships start with speed of 100. This is your base stat line. You can spend, you get 3 improvements on your ship. You can add guns, increasing your artillery score by 2, which basically means you then get to pick guns that take up to 2 points of artillery. You can improve the hull, improve the armor class of the ship by 2. You can improve its seaworthiness by 20, and you can increase its speed by 10. Note, these are cumulative, so if you make a decision that you want to give your ship 6 artillery, you totally can. But you have to deal with one distinctive choice. If you do not put at least one of your upgrades into either hull or seaworthiness, your ship will not have a plastic hull. So, in general, you're going to want to put at least one of your upgrades into either hull or seaworthiness. Now, why is plastic hull important? Well, first off, every day, if you have a plastic hull, you lose 1d4 seaworthiness. If you don't have a plastic hull, you lose 1d4 times 2 seaworthiness. And every day after that hull loss, you roll a seaworthiness check. If your ship rolls your seaworthiness or less on that seaworthiness check, you're good. If you fail that check, however, you begin going through a series of steps. First, the ship will be considered unsafe. Then it will be hobbled. And finally, it will be adrift. And going through these 3 things, your ship can lead to the death spiral of your ship being eaten up by the acid sea and everyone dying. And that is the mechanics for the Pirates of Pugmire. And this is not all the unique mechanics. It's just a quick overview of them. But I hope that gives you a taste. And I hope you enjoyed the series on the Realms of Pugmire. My next overview series is going to be talking about something unusual for me. A brand new edition of an RPG book. Next week, I begin talking about Cyberpunk Red, the most recent edition of Cyberpunk. So until then, I'd like you all to remember to have fun and keep gaming.